Hello and welcome to today's webinar, which is all about talking about Microsoft Copilot and how a real-world use case has transformed Valto's consultancy using the power of AI. My name is Dougie Wood. I'm the creative director here at Valto, but I'm also a Microsoft MVP. Now, this is an award given to me by Microsoft for my knowledge and sharing my knowledge with the community. So what we're going to be talking about today, well, it's a real life example of actually how our organization, Valto, were one of the first adopters of Microsoft Copilot, and we transformed how we engage with our customers using this technology. Now, the way we did this was actually we broke down the way that we interact with our customers and how we engage with them from the very first email to the point where we're pitching them a full proposal document of what we're going to propose to run as a project with them. And we broke it down into the main core areas that are quite timely or time consuming, I should say, for a consultant. And then we looked at how Microsoft Copilot could actually change this and improve efficiency. So this starts its journey by having an email come through from our customer, and essentially we're analysing the email to give as much information as possible. We book a meeting with our customer. Then we actually conduct what we refer to as a workshop, which is where we're gathering the requirements from our customer. Now, that can happen in person. But quite often nowadays, everyone's working remote or at least hybrid working. So a lot of those kind of workshops are taking place via Microsoft Teams, and we can use Copilot in Teams to not only recap the meeting, but also analyze it and help make sure we're getting the most out of that requirements gathering. Then we're using OneNote to store our drafts of notes and screenshots and other things we might be capturing during that workshop. And then we're using Excel, and Excel is using it's basically analysing and providing some analysis insights on some of the data that we've captured during the workshop, things which we might not have automatically spotted ourselves, or things which probably would have taken a lot of time to actually calculate. Then we're going to be looking at actually how do we draft our proposals based on the analysis from Excel, based on the notes we captured in OneNote, based on the requirements that were captured in Teams. We're actually creating our proposal document that we give to our customer using Microsoft Word. And then finally, how do we then create a pitch deck which summarizes probably a very lengthy document? Sometimes these can be 10 or 20,000 words inside of a Word document. We want to summarize that to give a nice pitch back to our customer with the key points. And now we're using Copilot in PowerPoint to generate a pitch deck from our proposal document. So let's jump in and start taking a look at this. Now, the start of this user journey that I'm telling you the story of actually starts from when our salesperson has potentially been engaging with a customer, in this case, Joe Bloggs, and they've got this email that's going backwards and forwards. And quite often, I don't know about you and your organization, but definitely for us, quite often our salespeople can be engaged with a prospect for definitely more than weeks, months, sometimes even years of conversations before a project actually lands. So that means that there could be a very long email thread. Now, this is obviously just a simulation, but this email thread could be going back months, if not years, and it could have loads of information in there. So as a consultant, as I've received this, so I'm wearing the hat as the consultant here. I've received this email from our salesperson, Sam, who's basically forwarded me over and asked if I could book in a workshop, but I want to get the details of this before I book in the workshop with my customer. And to do this, I'm using Copilot to summarize the email. So then once it's summarized the email, you can see here it's done quite a good job. It's told me that Joe Bloggs has reached out to Valto for looking for assistance with a SharePoint intranet. Sam's confirmed to Contoso that they've purchased the SharePoint workshop, and Joe Bloggs has informed Sam that they're only available Wednesdays and Thursdays for the workshop session, and Sam's asked if I can book in that workshop. Now, typically, we would want to have a little conversation with them before we actually book in the workshop. We just want to introduce ourselves, have a bit of a 15-minute intro. So I'm going to ask Copilot to draft me a response. So I'm going to say, please write a response to Joe Bloggs to book in a 15-minute meeting. Now, I'm just going to pause here because you can see when we're drafting, and this is not just emails, it's Word documents, PowerPoint, wherever we're using Copilot, we can actually ask it to change the tone of voice. So we can actually ask it to be more direct, to be neutral, to be more casual, be more formal. And for some unknown reason, yet to find a real proper purpose for this, we can make it a poem as well. So we can actually ask Copilot to write us a response as a poem. We can also have the length to be short, medium, or long, depending on what type of response we want. We can always refine it. It's not just going to automatically send the email. It's going to draft something first. So I'm going to ask it to be casual, and I want it to be a bit of a longer response as a kind of intro. So I'm going to ask it to generate it. And again, I could always ask it to redraft if I wanted to. The cool thing about the tone of voice as well is that in time, I predict that it's going to more than likely have an option to say, make it sound more like me, because Copilot is studying how people are interacting, how your emails, how you're talking, how you're writing. You could also ask it as well when you're asking it to refine it, again, to make it longer, make it sound more direct, make it more casual, make it more formal. You can also, if you wanted to, if there was a certain kind of tone of voice that you wanted to take, say, please take a more authoritative tone of voice, or even if you wanted to take the tone of voice maybe as like a celebrity, for example, or something like that, you could tell it, say, please, I've done this as a live demo in the past before. I've said, please use the tone of voice of Ryan Reynolds, the comedic actor. And then it's come back with a very witty, very jokey kind of tone of voice. So there's loads of ways that you could play around with this. But essentially, just to recap this story so far, our salesperson has forwarded a very long email thread to me as the SharePoint consultant in this case, and they've asked that I actually book in a workshop with this customer. I don't want to go through the whole email thread and figure out exactly what's happened, so I've used the summarize with Copilot button to summarize the email. I've got the gist of what I need to do, and I've asked Copilot to draft a response for me as well. So that's the kind of the first step in this particular story. The next step is we're now going to jump into the actual workshop. So what we're actually doing as part of the requirements gathering, quite often as they takes place in a Microsoft Teams meeting. Now, the cool thing I love about Microsoft Copilot is during a meeting which is taking place, we can actually ask it questions. So say, for example, here, I've jumped into Copilot whilst we're in the meeting talking. I said, what questions could the group ask to generate more ideas? Now, this is a simulated SharePoint workshop. But it's aware of what's been discussed, what's been said so far as requirements. So here it's now generating more questions that I could possibly ask. So again, wearing my SharePoint consultant's hat, it's going to make sure that I've not missed anything. It's going to make sure that we've asked the right questions to get the right results. So some questions. So what are the best practices for SharePoint Intranet? How can we ensure the new SharePoint Intranet aligns with our company's growth and innovation goals? So that's a really good one. That might be not something that I would have thought of right off the top of my head, but it's actually a really interesting question to ask the group. And what are the potential risks associated with SharePoint? So again, something that we haven't discussed in the workshop so far. What risks are there? What could happen? What's the impact? Is there any downtime? All these different things that we definitely want to discuss as part of the workshop. So let's say Copilot, treat it like another team member, essentially. Treat it like another body in the room that you can ask questions to. What does it think? It's aware of everything that's been discussed in the meeting so far. It's listening, and technically it's taking notes because it will be able to summarize the meeting afterwards to tell us who said what and when, what was agreed, all those types of things we can extract using Copilot. So it's listening and taking notes. We can ask it to generate some questions to help improve the efficiency of the meeting and improve the overall output of the meeting. Also, just to get another viewpoint, or you could tell it, take the role of X person. Let's say, for example, in this meeting, if our chief of marketing couldn't be in this meeting, we could say, take the role of a chief marketing officer. What would you like to input into a SharePoint intranet? And then get its thoughts. And again, it's another viewpoint we might not have considered as part of this workshop meeting. Next, we might want to ask it for kind of more topics. So, for example, here we're saying, what is some SharePoint intranet related topics we have not yet discussed that's worth discussing? So again, it's talking about, we've not talked about training yet, support. accessing via mobile phones and integrating with external systems. Again, fantastic examples of things that as the kind of meeting has evolved and we've talked more, it's aware of what we've talked about and what we've not yet talked about. And it's providing us some ideas of what we could possibly be discussing, again, to get the most out of this particular meeting. Then it's going to help us capture requirements. Now, in the meeting as well, one of the things we would often do as a follow-up to this is in our proposal documents, I often like to include the main, I call pains and gains. What are the pain points which are leading this person down this route to engage with us as a consultant? And what are the gains? What would they gain from having a successful SharePoint intranet? So one of the things that I would do to help with this is I'm asking Copilot to say, for each participant in the meeting, what was their biggest concern and what were they most excited about? And also, the thing about AI is you want to tell it what you want it to do, but you also want to tell it what you don't want it to do. You're providing these guide rails, and if you only provide it what you want it to do, there's a massive open gate basically for all the things it could possibly do or return to you that you don't want it to. So I've actually asked it here to say keep it short. Sounds a bit rude, but actually my experience of using Copilot is actually sometimes it can be a bit waffly. It can just go on, it can provide paragraphs and paragraphs, mountains of information that we don't need. So I'm asking to keep it short. I could also ask it to say, for example, give it to me in a bullet point format, which again would then keep it quite concise and reduce the amount of waffle that Copilot is potentially going to go off to do. So now you can see here, it's now generated me this list and saying that Dougie, let's jump back here. Dougie concerned about about the cost and the timeline. Hannah concerned about the adoption and training. Jade's concerned about the content, but most excited about having a centralized area for official communications. So we can see here, it's aware in context exactly what people have said, what they're excited about, what they're most concerned about. This is a game changer. It's not just spitting out actions and what was discussed. It's aware of the emotional elements of what we've discussed as well. In fact, as a real world example of this, we recorded this Teams meeting as an example. So these are real staff from Valto. It's not actually a real workshop. It was recorded so I can provide this demo to you today on this webinar. However, during the meeting, we thought we wanted to simulate a few extra scenarios to see how clever Copilot was and what types of emotions that it would be able to actually interpret. So we simulated somebody being angry and aggressive and shouting at somebody and saying, oh, where's this? Why is this not done? Why is this going? Blah, 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 and simulated that. Then afterwards, we asked Copilot to say what emotions were involved in the meeting and things like that. And it was smart enough to realize that we had already discussed what emotions we were going to simulate, and it actually listed out and said this person simulated anger as part of this fake recording sort of thing. So it was fully aware. We couldn't even trick it in that scenario. It was fully aware of what we were doing, what context, what emotions we were using. So not only was it aware of the anger emotion, it was also aware that we were spoofing it. We were faking that anger emotion as well. So I thought that was very insightful and very powerful. So say that those are the kind of examples that we can pull off directly from Teams. So now we've had our workshop. Just to recap the story, we've had the email from our customer. We have booked the workshop. We've conducted the workshop. We have recorded it, and we've used Microsoft Copilot during the meeting to get the most out of that requirements gathering. The next thing then is during that meeting, our consultant will likely have been taking notes throughout anyway, and they would have been building up a OneNote area of their notes. But following on from the meeting, we can see a recap of the meeting. We can see who said what and when, who spoke most during the meeting, some of the meeting notes, some of the concerns, considerations, agreements, key requirements, things like that. And we can just copy all of that straight out of the meeting directly into our OneNote notebook, which would be also full of our manual notes that we've taken, any screenshots that we've taken, any key bits of information. But it's also worth noting that we can use Copilot in OneNote. Now, quite often as a consultant, we would often conduct a workshop, dump all the information into OneNote, and potentially we might not come back to it for a few days. And as a consultant, we might be running multiple workshops a week with different customers, talking about totally different things. So we want to use Copilot quite often to summarize our notes. So we can see here we've summarized just to get us back up to speed. So I can go, yeah, I remember now what it was that we discussed and what each stakeholder, what their expectations were of that particular project that we're talking about. So we can get ourselves back up to speed using Copilot inside of OneNote. Now, from that, we could also ask it, say, if you remember, we asked it about the stakeholders before, what they're most excited about and things like that, what their objectives were. And we can actually have Copilot then create us a table of that information. So here I've asked it to say, please create a table for stakeholders. It's created it. It's a bit squished inside of the Copilot view, so I can copy it out and I can paste it directly into my page. So now you can see a very short snippet here. Now, obviously, we could customize this table. We could ask it to add different columns. We could split out what they're most excited about versus what they're most concerned about. We could, if they've spoken out loud and they've introduced themselves, their name, their job title, their department, all those sort of things, we could include them in the tables if we wanted to. But now you can see really easily here the stakeholders, their objectives to improve communication and collaboration, Hannah, efficiency, Jade, creating engaging interactive intranets. We can see all of that straight off the back using Copilot. So then we've got all of our notes together. So our notes are now nicely compiled together inside of OneNote. That will probably, as I say, have draft notes, notes that have been taken from Copilot from the Teams meeting, screenshots of things as we've gone along, and just general kind of data. Then what we would also do during the workshop is quite often we would create an Excel spreadsheet, and specifically for, say, like a SharePoint workshop, we'd be listing out all the SharePoint sites that we would plan on creating for that particular organization, the department which would own that SharePoint site, the content owner, so who would actually be the main contact, but also who would be creating the content on that particular SharePoint site. Whether it's restricted or open, so the security, whether we let people come and go from it, or whether it be very locked down, and whether it be a team site or a communication site. Now, there's loads of other things that we would typically capture. This, again, is just a simulated spreadsheet. And in fact, actually, another little kind of side note is we use Copilot to generate this sample data. So if you ever needed to generate sample data using Copilot, you can just quickly create a spreadsheet document if you were doing something to scenario. And in fact, actually, we have a separate video which is all about creating sample content using Copilot. So if you want to go and look that up, that's on our YouTube channel as well. So just losing my voice a little bit here now, sorry. So with Copilot, you can see here, as soon as I've gone into my Excel spreadsheet and open up Copilot, there's actually a few prompts that it's already asking me if I want to use, or I can type in my own. So I'm saying visualize the amount of teams or communication sites by department. So this is really useful because we can then see by department how many SharePoint sites they're going to have. Now it's created me a little table here, and if I wanted to, I could ask it to say, please order it by whoever's got the most SharePoint sites, as an example. Or I can choose just to add it into a page, and I could do the ordering and sorting directly from in the page as well. Now, this is really useful information as a consultant because I can quickly work out, well, actually, the sales team seem to have the most amount of communication sites versus human resources who've only got one SharePoint site. So that lets me know that actually are sales overwhelmed? Do they have too many SharePoint sites? Is it going to be too much for them to maintain and keep that moving forward in the future? So I can use that as part of my recommendations, which go into my proposal afterwards. Another question I might choose to ask Copilot is, which content owner has the most sites? Again, we don't want to overwhelm just one person. If we found that one person had the most sites, so we can see here that Derek has 8 sites, that might be too much for one person. So we could actually drill into that a little bit more and make sure that Derek doesn't get overwhelmed. Now, the other cool thing is the more that you use Copilot, the better the suggestions that Copilot will have. So you can see here, it's got some suggested prompts I might want to run. So which team or communication site for department legal, distribution of content owner by department. So again, so we can see by department how many content owners are there. All really useful things which might give us insights, which we could then go into our proposal, our recommendations, which go to our customer. Another thing I've just asked it is, which is the most common, restricted or open? Now, as a SharePoint consultant, that's good for me to know, to realize actually the most common type of security setting they've requested is restricted, which means, again, in my proposal that goes back to the customer, I can say, did you know that actually based on what we've discussed, you're going to have a very restricted SharePoint intranet, which might be fine. That might hit it bang on the nail on the head of what they're after, that they don't want people to be able to come and go from their intranet. They don't want people to be able to easily sort of find information and things like that, which potentially they shouldn't be able to access. Which is fine. Whereas actually, they might come back and say, actually, no, we want a totally open intranet. We want people to come and go as they please. We want information to easily be found. And again, there's pros and cons that we can let our customer know about. We could say, if it's restricted, typically restricted intranets are going to require a lot more administration time to manage the permissions and the security controls about who has access to those different areas of SharePoint. Whereas an open model, the benefits of that is that you don't have to control that as much. However, the downside is people might find information or they might store information in a public space that they shouldn't do. So there's pros and cons to both that we can easily explain. Now we have the insights which have been provided to us directly from Copilot. So now we've done our analysis of our information that we've captured during our workshop inside of Microsoft Teams. So there's a little recap. We've booked in our workshop, we've conducted our workshop, we've got our draft notes, and we've also got our draft data that we got from our Teams meeting. We've done some insight on that, and that's actually opened up a bunch of information that I didn't have in my head as a consultant directly from this. It surfaced things like that it's going to be a very restricted type of intranet. We've seen exactly how many SharePoint sites are going to be per department. We've seen who's going to have the most SharePoint sites, and all these things we can now put as insights into our workshop report that goes back to our customer to give them better understanding, better insight about what it is that we're proposing to them. Next up, we're then going to look at drafting our proposal document. Now, this is actually an example of something that we've drafted directly from OneNote. So from OneNote, we can actually generate a document. So this is now a document that's been drafted from OneNote. You can see it's pulled through our objectives, it's pulled through the tables of information, and this is our report. As from OneNote, we've used Copilot and said, please draft a report from these notes. And also what we've done is we've said, please make it look like a previous document. So from a prompt, we can say, please make it look like X document. Now we have our draft of our proposal put together. We can even add more information. So it's fully aware of all the text and content of this document. But it also can access information from the web. So Copilot is not just grounded in your work documents, it's also grounded in the web. So it's got full access. Everything that you could access from Google, Copilot can access as well. So I'm asking it here to say, write me a paragraph that explains the importance of SharePoint design for user interface. So as a consultant, when I read over this draft, I felt like actually it's missing that information about the importance of the design aspects. And this is now where potentially I'm going to put in a little paragraph about it to summarize it. All I would then need to do, obviously, is add in a title, tweak the text in any way to make it sound a little bit more like the way I want it to sound. And there we go. It's provided us that information from the web, from the internet. I agree with all the information that it's put in there, and I'm happy to include it as part of my report. Let's go on to the next one. The other cool thing I like about Copilot, and in fact, if anything, I think this is probably my favorite thing about Copilot in this scenario, in this use case of Copilot, is we can use it to help our main objectives ourselves. So as a consultant, truly my main objective really is I want to make sure that this project actually sells, and the client actually takes this project going forward and moves forward with Valto to deliver their SharePoint intranet for them. So if that's my goal, I want to make sure that I've done everything possible, answered every question the customer could possibly ask, squashed every concern they possibly have, and put all the information and make sure it's easy to consume. It's not using any jargon or anything like that, and it's simple as possible for them to consume, understand, and inevitably move forward with us to build their SharePoint intranet. So to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to ask Copilot to take the role of the customer and review this document on their behalf. Now, if I just jump back to the prompt, you can see I'm saying, I want you to take the role of the customer receiving this SharePoint intranet proposal. Is there anything missing from it that you would that would influence your decision to proceed with the project? Now, we could also ask it to maybe go and look at some of the previous proposal documents that we've done for similar projects, to make sure that nothing's been missed out from this report. Now, as I say, it's fantastic that it can take the role. So it's taking the role of the customer, and now it's looking at it through the lens of the customer to think about, well, if I was the customer, what would I want to know? What doesn't this document have that maybe it should have, which might influence my decision to purchase this project going forward? So as you can see, it's combing through documents, emails, and chats, and so much more other information that it might find relevant. That is going to improve the likelihood. Now, it's bouncing around a little bit because it's still not finished. It's still adding things here. But if we were to scroll up, you'll then see, and expand this out a little bit just so it's easier to read. But you'll see what is actually asked here. So it's realised what it wants. So objectives, the proposal should clearly outline the objectives of the SharePoint intranet, such as improving internal communications, centralising information and aligning with organisational goals. Design and user experience. So the design of the SharePoint intranet should be user-friendly. Authority and decision-making. It's important to know who has the authority to make decisions regarding the project. And then it starts giving me some specific things about the document, so maybe a bit more about the security and the compliance, maybe some information past performance, client references. So here's another good one. So I know in this particular document so far, there's no client references, there's no use case, there's no case studies, there's nothing like that. So actually, that would prompt me to go, do you know what? That's a really good point. I'm going to add this to my document, which is going to improve it. Some other things as well here is talking about integration with existing systems. I've not talked about any integrations with existing systems. I've not talked about any support packages or training that we're going to offer as part of this project as well. These are all fantastic suggestions, which I might not have considered if I was trying to sort of obviously create this document as quickly and as efficiently as possible. But Copilot spotted this. Now, again, we look at this whole process, and from beginning to end of this process for our consultancy team, this used to take weeks of time, and now it only takes days. And this is one of the areas that we're saving time, because previously, if we were to write a report, any reports that we create must be signed off by another consultant before it's sent out to our customers. But this process of using Copilot is now taking that secondary consult, the secondary consultant, rather than spending a couple of hours having to review the document and come back with multiple suggestions, like, have we talked about integrating existing systems? Have we talked about support? Have we talked about scalability? All these things which potentially another consultant will have thought of. Copilot's thought of it. So it's taken it down from a couple of hours to sort of half an hour sort of time. So we've saved loads of time there. Also, what we're also saving time on is multiple iterations of the consultant having to review this. So say, for example, it might have been that this goes to the second consultant, and they, on the first time they look at this, they find 5 things wrong with it, or 5 improvements, and then it goes back to the first consultant to update, and then it goes back to them, and then they find something else that needs to be improved. We found that actually that's cut down from multiple iterations to just one, and rather than say averagely finding 5 to 6 things that they would replace, it's only 1 or 2 things. So it's much quicker, it's sped up the whole process, and it's made things a lot more efficient. So, as I say, the consultants want to ensure we have captured all the information. We present it back in the simplest form, avoiding using tech jargon. All objectives have been documented, concerns have been addressed, and we give the best chance of securing the project. And we've asked Copilot to take a role. As I say, we can ask it to take any role we like, but asking it to take the role of a customer is really useful. And we've asked, how can we improve the report? Information from past projects, so building trust, integration with existing systems, and maybe providing a timeline. So all these are really useful things that Copilot suggested to me. Cool. I also want to make sure as well that if you have any questions, please use the comments to the side of this video, either the quick chat or the comments below. Ask any questions as we're going along, guys, because I want to make sure that we're answering any questions that you might have. So we've now created our reports that we're ready to send to our customer. But as I say, typically what we would do is we wouldn't want to just send this massive document over to our customer, because it would be tens of pages, 10,000 words at least. It would be a big meaty document. So we don't expect that we're going to send it over to them and then consume it straight away. So instead what we want to do is we want to book a meeting with them, maybe 30 minutes, 60 minutes, where we're going to walk them through the key points about the proposal that we're discussing with them. And we want to present that to them via PowerPoint, which is essentially our pitch deck. So this is where we can now draft a proposal directly from our pitch deck. So like I was saying before, how we created our Word document directly from our OneNote, this is us now creating our PowerPoint directly from our Word document. So you can see here now, if I click on Copilot, what's going to appear, so this is just a blank PowerPoint. I'm just showing you how easy it is to do directly from a blank PowerPoint. But as we've opened up our blank PowerPoint and clicked on Copilot, you can see there's 3 prompts. We can either create a presentation about something, or we can create a presentation from a file. So if I click on from a file, it's going to show me what are the recent Word documents I've been working on. And then I can say create presentation. Now I could be a bit more specific and I could tell it what slides I wanted and things like that. But this is just the quickest prompt, quick and dirty. It's going to have a look over this. Now, it's combing through the file and it's planning what slides in the presentation it's going to create. And it's doing that. I think mostly it's doing that by looking at the headers of the document. So make sure you've got proper headers in your document as a structure is going to really help this process. And what I often find as well is that it will create more than what you need it to create. So you can see here now it's going to create a whole bunch of different pages that I probably don't need. In this case, I think it's going to create like 20 odd slides. And you can see a little progress bar at the bottom. Now, I am showing you this in live time because I want to set real expectations that it is going to take 30 seconds to maybe 2 minutes to create, depending on the size of your document. I have a quite big document, so it is a little bit slow. But now you can see it's created all of the slides for me on the left-hand side. So if I just close out Copilot, I can just expand the screen a little bit, and you can see it's brought through the agenda, it's brought through an introduction, it's brought through the workshop overview, attendees, the objectives, all the key things that potentially we would want. It's also brought through any tables, screenshots that it's found. It's also used some images, which I've not used in my document. It's just basically looked at the stock image library in PowerPoint and decided to use them for me. I can then choose to go and apply my color themes, my branding, over the top of my PowerPoint, so my PowerPoint is then ready to be used as a pitch deck. I can also, obviously, as I say, typically with a pitch deck, you probably only want about 10 slides, so it will be a case of just going through those slides and deleting anything that you don't want to be there. Cool. The next thing then inside of our PowerPoint is we might want to improve the styling of the PowerPoint. Now, this is actually is quite a new thing, so I've yet to actually got a full demo of this, but I have just a little snippet which has come from the YouTube channel of Microsoft directly. So you can see in Copilot, we could say, please use a specific font. So we can say, change all the fonts in this deck to a specific font. And then you can see it'll go through, find all those fonts, and then change them to be what font we've actually requested. We could also do this with sort of other types of styles, fonts, and things like that, to really get that design to be as we want inside of our PowerPoint. So as I say, if you've got any questions, guys, please let us know. Use those comment feeds, ask any questions as we're going along. Some final things which are good to know. So what we've been talking about so far has been related to Microsoft 365 Copilot, or Copilot for Microsoft 365. Now, that is the off-the-shelf product for basically interacting with not only web data. So the web data element of it is kind of like ChatGPT. So Copilot for the web is a direct competitor of ChatGPT. We then have been showing you the kind of elements of today has been the Copilot. You need a Copilot license to be embedded into your documents and using your documents inside of Microsoft 365. And that's all the out-of-the-box functionality of Copilot. Now, if you wanted to have a very specific use case for Copilot, so say, for example, you wanted it to look at data in a third-party system or in Azure or whatever it is, you would need to have a bespoke Copilot. And we're getting a lot of questions at Valto about this at the moment. A lot of people asking questions about, can we have something where it's a case management system and it's looking at other cases we worked on in the past before and then generate a document based on that? Or can it look at previous projects we've put together and then generate a report based on previous things? So a lot of those customizations and automations specifically, so not just Copilot is called Copilot because it's not going to do it for you. It's an assistant for you. It's not autopilot. But if you wanted AI to become autopilot and autonomous and go and do things based on certain triggers, like an email coming in and automatically responding and drafting documents for you, that's going to require Copilot Studio to do those types of things. So this is where we can create bespoke Copilots. It can tap into knowledge or databases that you already have. So you could create a very specific knowledge base of information. Maybe you've got a knowledge base which is in a third-party system that you want it to tap into, and we can pull that data from external sources into Copilot. So maybe you're using Salesforce, maybe you're using HubSpot, maybe you're using loads of different third-party tools, and you want to leverage that data. You would need to create a bespoke Copilot with Copilot Studio for that. These are referred to as agents, and they have often specific tasks. It helps you scale your team much quicker because you can then have just a bot which is just specifically doing one job. Maybe it's creating invoices, maybe it's creating proposal documents, whatever it is. You can really laser focus it. So we've talked before about Copilot having roles or tasks or things like that. Essentially, what you can do with a Copilot agent is it has a very specific role, very specific set of guidelines which it's following so that it doesn't go rogue. It's just laser focused on that one thing. We can also have triggering actions, which basically means that we can have it do things like ordering equipment. So say, for example, that bot was a IT support bot, and somebody asked that they wanted to order a new security tag or laptop or something like that. We could maybe then trigger some approval processes, so someone has to approve that laptop before it's purchased, but then once it's approved, it could automatically then go to a third-party system and order that laptop on behalf of that particular employee. Other things which are coming soon as well, we have things like agent memory, so it's going to remember what you've talked about with it. At the moment, a lot of the kind of chats, they are just specific in that one instance, but over time it's going to remember what you've talked about so that it can improve its responses and be a bit more specific and custom to you. Also coming soon is some agent-to-agent collaboration. So as I said before, those agents can be very specific about one job that it's doing. But let's say, for example, you've got multiple agents which are doing very specific jobs. We can get a Copilot agent to actually go and call another agent to kick off another workflow, to start something else. So say, for example, we have a bot which is creating proposals, and we have one that's creating invoices or something like that. I don't know, this is a terrible example, but you could get the proposal one to follow up with the invoicing one to say, hey, we've had this proposal now accepted, please now issue an invoice. And the Copilot bot, which is doing invoices and specifically laser focus on that, can go away and then trigger the actions. I know, terrible example, but just to give you an idea of how one agent can then possibly be triggering another agent. Some other useful things to know: you can also use Copilot for, say, policies and procedures. So this is something which you can do if you wanted to have a bespoke version, you would need to have Copilot Studio, but this is just an example of out-the-box Copilot. I can ask it, say, what is my annual leave entitlement? And now, because at Valto, we have all of our key documents stored in what we call our controlled document system, which is basically a policy management system where we make sure that all of our documents stay up to date, reviewed, and approved using automated workflows. We've got all of the information, key information that we need stored in one place in our SharePoint. So Copilot can then go and get these answers. So it said at Valto, the annual leave entitlement for all employees is 25 days, which is true, and paid each year. In addition, we also have 8 public holidays, which is true, and the holiday year runs from January 1st to December 31st. Again, it's all true information. It's then layered that up with even more information where it's saying employees must take at least 20 days of annual leave each year. There's also a flexi window in December where employees can request to buy or sell up to 5 days of entitlement. So this is actually pairing multiple bits of information together from our handbooks, our policies, our procedures, and actually, if we were to click on where it's got these little numbers, it will actually surface to us exactly where it's got this information from. It's not just making it up. It can evidence, it can support where it's got this information. So rather than an employee having to dig through mountains of policies and procedures and employee handbooks and loads of documents, in fact, our employee handbook, I think, is about 50 pages long, something like that. Whereas actually, rather than digging through all that information, we can use Copilot to surface information that we specifically need. And like I was saying earlier, the more you use Copilot, the better the responses, or what I should say, the better the prompt suggestions will be. So you can see here now, it said, can you explain a bit more about the flexi window in December? How do I request to buy or sell holiday entitlement? Are there any restrictions on when I can take my annual leave? So it's got those prompts because it understands the context on what I've been asking Copilot about this. And here you can see we have the main policy that it's referring to. So if I wanted to, I could click on that and open up that policy, or I can drill in and ask more questions by clicking on these individual prompts that are going to take us, I say, further down the rabbit hole to understand this information. But this is just an example of policies and procedures. Often information can be buried, can be very hard, very difficult to find. And in fact, in the webinar that I ran a couple of weeks ago, I went through some examples where I was using Copilot to find information. I was using it to search, say, hey, can you help me find this particular document? So often not knowing who to ask, Copilot can be a fantastic place because you can also maybe ask it and say, well, who should I ask about the flexi leave policy if I have any more questions? Which Copilot can't answer, and then maybe it might surface up who the author of this document is, or maybe it might suggest to me to go and speak to our people and HR director. So it can give all that type of information directly as responses. So we can use Copilot as our first line. So as our first line kind of support of questions and things like that, which is going to alleviate any of those questions which typically get asked and might burden the likes of HR departments for these types of requests, or IT for support requests, or general kind of operations. We're removing the burden. We could also link this up to an information knowledge base, so we can again extract better FAQs and things like that. It could be SharePoint documents, pages of information. It's important to have up-to-date policies. So for this to work properly, you are going to need to make sure that your policies stay properly up to date. And this is what I was saying about Valto have pre-built a system in SharePoint called Controlled Documents, which will ensure that your documents, your key information, stays up to date. Because you need that in order to make sure that when you apply AI like Copilot over the top of your documents, you're not surfacing old information. Because say, for example, if I'd asked that question about my holiday and flexible leave or whatever, if I had old policy documents stored somewhere else in SharePoint, and maybe all the employees, the human element of it, we know, oh, that's the old policies. We've not touched them for 10 years. We don't look at those anymore. Oh, this is the new area that you must use. Copilot's not going to know that, and it could potentially surface up information from old areas that you shouldn't have. Now, as I say, there's multiple ways that we can solve that. We can use, for example, Valto's controlled document system, which I should say we can offer as a fixed price deployment, and it's not going to break the bank either. It's not drastically expensive. And if you want to have a free demo of that, use the link in the description below to contact us, and we can show you that system as well. But essentially, that's one of the best ways. We can also use retention policies to make sure that documents and emails and all the kind of data you have inside of Microsoft 365 is either getting archived or it's getting cleansed and removed after a certain period of time. I say we can make sure all of our documents stays up to date through proper management, approvals, and also our control document system also has the feature to confirm who's read particular information. So again, it might be that Copilot surfaces it, or it might be that they get it from an email, but either way, they can confirm that they read that particular document as well. Cool. The other thing as well, which is often a good thing to know about Copilot, often people get very concerned that from everything I've just mentioned before, that they think, oh, actually, yeah, maybe we shouldn't just rush into Copilot because we've got way too much data all over the place, which needs to be cleansed. It's not in a good place. It's dirty. It's outdated. It's got incorrect information, things like that. Now, it's true. You definitely need to cleanse it. You definitely need to have a way of making sure your data stays up to date going forward. As just doing one big cleanse on day one and then forgetting about it, you're going to have that same problem in a couple of years' time. So you're going to need to have a system which is making sure that you're staying on top of it. However, it doesn't mean that you need to be 100% ready, perfect data, everything's done and dusted, because that's going to take a long time to do. So what you can do is you can restrict Copilot to only look at specific areas of your Microsoft 365. So you can see here it's saying your organization admin has restricted Copilot from accessing certain SharePoint sites. So say, for example, we've got our HR site, which got all those policies, procedures we're really happy with, but we have an IT site, which has got loads of information which is outdated and we're not happy with. Then what we do is we just say only surface the HR site. We tell Copilot in the back end, in the admin center, which SharePoint sites it can look at and which SharePoint sites it cannot look at yet. So this makes it way easier for us to control the rollout. We can do it as step by step. We can do a guinea pig rollout, which basically we look at just a specific area and just roll out step by step from that point onwards. So cool. The final thing I want to mention is Valto are offering free Copilot assessments. Now, this is completely free. If you were to come to us and have this sort of purchased off the shelf, it'd be best parts of $3,000 to do this, but it's completely free at the moment because Microsoft are funding these assessments. So if you want to get your hands on this, there is a link in the description below to contact us. Essentially, what we do is we engage with you. It's about an hour, 2-hour engagement. And what we do is we assess your Microsoft 365 environment and we break it down into some core areas, which includes security. So how well is your security set up for Microsoft 365 to have Copilot applied on top of it? Because one thing we're seeing a lot of at the moment is that people are applying Copilot on top of their Microsoft 365, and then it's finding Copilot is uncovering security issues that you already have. The security issues are already there. It's not going to make security issues. It's just going to expose ones that you already have. So to give you like an example, let's say, for example, you've got some sensitive information. Let's say, for example, you've got a spreadsheet with every employee's salary in there, for example. Now, if that was stored in a SharePoint site in a folder, which technically everyone has access to, but yet no one's gone to look and manually go through all those folders, no one's looked for it yet. They've not found the information, but technically they could access it. Copilot doesn't see things in a sort of two-dimensional world. It sees it in a three-dimensional world. So if I, as a user, then go to Copilot and ask and say, oh, what's the salary of our CEO? If I have access to it because of this as a security issue, then what is going to happen is Copilot is going to go and find the information and surface it and bring it back to me. Now, one of the things, as I say, we're looking at is how well set up is your SharePoint, your Teams. So from an optimization point of view, how well is your structure of Microsoft 365? How well is it secured? Do you have things like security policies and security labels enabled to make sure that data can't accidentally be leaked or it's not accidentally put into the wrong hands of people? We're also going to look at licensing, and that's not just Copilot. We can also look at all your other Microsoft 365 licenses and make sure you are getting the best price possible on your licenses. We'll also make sure that the licenses you do have are actually properly, basically making sure that you don't have licenses that you don't need? Are you most efficient with your licenses? And then we can give you a recommendation going forward what you would need to do. As I say, this summary report gives you those key kind of areas. It also will tell you any actions. Now, you're free to go and take those actions yourself if you want to security harden your Microsoft 365 yourself. If you want to go and tidy things up, if you want to get licenses yourself, go ahead. That's totally fine. Or Valto can provide you a fixed price for Valto to resolve all of those issues for you and hold your hand and make sure you have a proper handover and a proper adoption process to make sure that your Copilot rollout is as successful as possible. Because one of the other things is Copilot's not cheap at the end of the day. You want to make sure that you're getting the best return on investment possible for your investment. So as I say, if you have if you're considering this in the next few months, please reach out to us whilst Microsoft are paying for these assessments. There's a link in the description below. Contact us, book in your free assessment. I'm now just going to go to the final slide, which is just to say thank you for joining today. If you have any final questions at all, I'm just going to be basically leaving this running now for another 30 seconds. And if you have any questions, I'll be answering any of those questions below. Obviously, keep an eye out. We've got more webinars. We've got at least 2 or 3 webinars a month now, which are coming out. So do have a look at those. They're not just Copilot. If you're interested in things like building out mobile apps using Power Apps, building out intranets using SharePoint, we have loads of webinars about all of those things as well. And we also have some physical events coming up in Chester, in Manchester and London. So again, go and check out our Eventbrite page for any events which are coming up shortly. Okay, cool. So just say thank you very much for joining today. The recording will be sent out to everybody. Hopefully we've answered all of your questions. If you do have any further questions, you can use the comments feed below and we'll make sure we get answers to those as well. Thank you.